Okay. I'm reading The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath.
I'm also reading The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath.
I'm reading The Bluest Eye. I had to remember it for a second.
I'm reading The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and then we can just talk about like the themes of our book and then like how they relate. So The Bluest Eye was a lot about racism and women, and so we're talking about the second part of the book, right?
Yeah.
So like ours, The Bluest Eye dealt a lot with like abuse in the second part, especially with like rape and her father not raping and like abusing his wife and his daughter. I don't know if your book dealt with anything similar to that.
I had a moment of that, but in the first half.
Yeah, ours was more about like our second part of the book was kind of. I thought it was more disturbing than the first part because I thought the first part of our book was kind of like the signs leading up to depression, and then the second part was like it kind of like trying different ways. It showed me like trying different ways of like I'm so sorry.
You guys are the worst group.
I saw Bethany hit Jack in the camera, so I started laughing.
Okay, so basically, the way I interpreted our book was the first half was, you could obviously tell she had depression just based off the first couple like pages.
Yeah, there were lots of like different signs of her being depressed, like that you could pick up on.
But then,
like what?
So she's constantly like nothing like her describing the scenery and the setting is always negative. There's no like positive words like sunny, happy. There's nothing that relates to being happy at all. She considers suicide. She thinks about suicide a lot.
Oh.
Not like towards the end, she thinks about it, and then like she doesn't think it'd be a bad thing.
No, in the second half of the book. She started like trying different attempts and like brainstorming like different ways she could do it like the most peacefully. And so she was like, it would have like different chapters, and it would have like a title from a news article of someone who attempted suicide, and then it would like have a few paragraphs about her like contemplating if that was a good decision or not for her, but she wouldn't ever go through with them. She just would like, at one point there was one about her trying to like drown herself, but she just like couldn't go through with it because
she'd find one thing that like made her not want to. Like,
yeah.
The water was too cold.
So it sounds like your book is more about her abusing herself, and ours is more about like others abusing other
That's
people.
Accurate.
Except I guess ours could kind of relate to like abusing oneself, just because the characters did talk negatively about themselves a lot, especially with like mainly with like how they looked and stuff. But they were everything they said, like a lot of the things they said were all negative, and they didn't really seem to care much for themselves.
And yeah, I also think our book can relate to theirs just because of like the whole mental health thing. Like theirs talked a lot about depression. Ours didn't really talk about mental health until the very end, but it talked about what happened to Piccola after. That was the girl who got raped by her dad, and her kid ended up being a stillborn. So she like suffered a lot with mental health problems after that. Like there's a whole chapter where she's basically having a conversation with herself, and like the whole town says that she's crazy pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that can relate to our book, because you said so it was something with mental health and people thought she was crazy.
Well,
yeah.
She was crazy. Well, okay, she kind of was going crazy at the very end because she got impregnated by her dad, and then didn't her dad end up dying too? Like he went away and then he ended up dying, and then she was really young. She was maybe like 14 or something. And she had this baby, and her baby died. So there was a lot of like traumatic events going on in her life, which kind of made her go insane a little bit. And so then she just started talking to herself, and it doesn't specifically say she started having mental issues, but you could kind of pick up on it that she was just talking to herself, and that was the only person she like ever interacted with anymore. So like the things she talked about, you could tell she was going crazy, and she started like hallucinating stuff. like she started picturing herself in different ways than she actually is. Do you know what I'm talking about, Bethany?
I feel
Like with the blue eyes.
I feel like that kind of can relate to ours, but like not necessarily in the same ways. But towards the end of the book, like she kept transferring, like the main character, her name was Esther, and she kept transferring from like different asylums to like different asylums, and so she'd like move up or she'd move back down to them, and she'd like meet a bunch of doctors, and there was one of them, and he was. I don't remember what his name was, but
Gordon. I think it was Dr. Gordon. The first one she met.
the first doctor.
The first doctor she met.
No. It was the guy from the hospital that was like black, and she was like, I didn't like him because I could tell I was one of his first crazy patients, and he like didn't know how to handle it. And I don't remember what his name was, but she was like, I didn't like feeling like I was one of the only people he's had to deal with like this, because she wasn't like the worst off out of all the people, but she definitely wasn't the best because she wasn't opening up to the different doctors. She just like she kept trying to like hide it herself that she had depression. Like she would tell herself that she wasn't going to get better, but she was also telling herself that she didn't want to open up.
What was like the onset of her depression? Did she ever explain that?
She kind of said that the last time she really truly felt happy was like when she was 9. Well, that was in the first half of the book.
Did it ever say why she was upset? Like what was causing
probably
it?
9. It was the last time. It was like around her like death of her dad, a little bit before that.
Yeah.
So both characters have dad issues. That's
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like in the second part of the book, she had she visited her dad's grave for the first time since he died, because her mom didn't let her like see her dad's grave because he thought like once it happened, like there was no need for like the little girl to go visit it. And she sat there in the rain at her dad's grave, and she said she felt like she was truly depressed and not just suffering with it. Like she actually could tell that she had depression in that moment.
Yeah.
What other theme should we talk about? Or no, you were gonna say something. What were you gonna say?
Well, like I just remember how you were saying like how like a lot of people like looked at her and thought she was like kind of crazy. So like how you said that about earlier about your guys' characters. And so that kind of reminded me about how so at a point in the book, the main character Esther, she goes in and she asks for more sleeping pills, and so then the doctor recommends she goes sees a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist she meets is Dr. Gordon, and during like their discussion and them talking to each other, it mainly felt like he was just kind of like listening in, and he wasn't actually like paying attention. He was just kind of there, waiting for her to get done, and like he actually didn't like think like he never like kind of like he didn't like the way he like spoke. He was talking like what do you make up, like it was like what did you like kind of come up with your head that you have magically. And so he didn't actually look at them like an actual disease. He kind of looked at it as like someone like faking it, or like thinking like they're worse off.
Yeah.
Okay, back to the book. Okay.
Too much.
So we can talk about some themes.
We can cut that out. Okay. Actually, I don't even know if you can cut that out.
Actually, can I get like a story about your guys' book? I really don't.
Okay, I'll talk about it because I feel like I haven't talked a lot. So pretty much, our book was in like a few different perspectives. So there was like a girl named Claudia who talked in first person, and then there was Piccola and her whole family, and like it kind of switched between who they were talking about because they developed both her mom and dad, and like her family itself, or the house they lived in. So it kind of explained how Claudia and Piccola crossed paths, and then it also added like some different perspectives. There was one about this guy named Soap House, I think was his name.
I don't know how to pronounce it.
I forgot what it was. But I don't know, that chapter was kind of weird. But pretty much it talks about like just different little girls and what like beauty meant to them. So, like, Claudia never really, like, cared about what she looked like, and she would kind of get annoyed at the fact that, like, little girls thought that, like, Shirley Temple was, like, the cutest thing in the world. Like, she would, like that kind of stuff.
And for the second part of the book, like, the second half, it talked a lot about, it went like back in time and kind of told the background stories for a lot of the people. So it told the background story of the mother and the father, and then how they related, and then how it came to like the present. So with the mother, it talked about like when she first met Charlie, which is the name of the husband, and then how things were great, and then he later started to like abuse her, and then she went into a little detail about that, and then you saw it from the perspective of Charlie, and like kind of started to realize why he was the way he was, like it wasn't random. And so you got both sides of the stories, and then it ended up going back to the present and talking about like the moment that it was like the moment then that he raped her. And then it kind of flashed forward to like afterwards, which is when you're talking about the mental effects that she had.
And it like kind of ended with Claudia talking about Piccola, so like that's kind of how they managed to fit that back in.
Yeah.
It was kind of all over the place. Like I was a little confused reading it, but like it would make sense more if you were.
A question I guess I have for both Jack and JC. What do you think was like the main, not really main message, but kind of like what was the main key point or key factor-ish type of thingy? I don't know what I'm trying to say. Like the big message of your book.
Message.
I think a good way to think about the message was that I don't know if it's necessarily a message to the reader or a message like about Esther to the reader, but she kept mentioning like how she kept thinking she was living in the bell jar and how everyone's living in the bell jar, and the bell jar is just that's just her mental illness hanging over her head. And she said that everyone's just going to go back into the same bell jar every day, whatever. So it's talking about how every day it's not going to get better. It's just the same thing hanging over your head. So I think like at the end of the book, the reader could like truly understand that people who do have mental diseases are not, like, it's not easy to fix. Like, it's going to be there, and it's going to basically just like go around with them every day in their lives. So I think that's what Sylvia Plath was trying to get at, because she actually, after writing this and after writing a few poems, she actually committed suicide herself. So
it's hard to find like a message through it, because I felt like there was multiple times where I didn't get put in like people's shoes, but like I felt like down while reading this. Like I didn't like actually like, because that's like impossible, but I just felt that like my demeanor personally reading the book was just like I was sad. Like I felt like the emotion. Like I couldn't like really feel happy while reading this book. And at the end, I like how she ended it. How like, because a lot of books end with a happy ending. Oh, like, everything's okay, everything's perfect, like everything's going the right way. This book kind of ended with a positive note, but still like into the unknown. Like she got released. She went to the meeting, get released from the asylum, and that's where it ends off. So it ends off with hope, but she's not fixed, and nothing will be like the same.
Yeah, I think that I've never like had a mental illness, but I definitely thought there's a lot of stuff that like she definitely had. Like I think she had more than depression. Honestly, I think she had probably like, I don't necessarily know what I'm trying to say.
Suffered PTSD from her dad passing away.
It wasn't really that though, because it was just like that was the last time she described like the last time she really remembered being happy, but it's not. She doesn't have like any like symptoms really.
I feel like there was definitely something else going on though, because when she got transferred to a hospital because she attempted to attempted suicide in the cellar of her house through like sleeping pills, and she wound up in a hospital, and she kept like, the nurses were trying to help her, and she broke a mirror, and she didn't like know that she did it, and then she kicked like this ball of mercury off the table, and she didn't know she did it. And so I feel like there's definitely something else going on than depression, because like I understand that depression is like a bad disease, but like it doesn't necessarily make you do stuff like that. So I think something is going on.
Yeah.
Pretty much the like main, like what Morgan asked about your book, like what was the main like point of
Message,
it.
yeah.
So the title kind of came from, like, what was considered beautiful at this time period was, like, kids with blonde hair and blue eyes. Like, that's what everybody idolized in the media, like Marilyn Monroe and Shirley
And
Temple.
this was in the 60s, right? 60s or 40s, somewhere
I think it was the 60s.
somewhere around that area.
Or no, it was in the 40s.
I think it was the 40s. Yeah.
And it was, like, written later.
Mhm.
But she wrote it in the perspective of that. So pretty much what they were trying to talk about was that Piccola would always say, like, she would feel beautiful if she had blue eyes, and in the end she, like, was imagining that she did, and that was part of, like, what was the onset of her mental illness. And so I really feel like one of the things that they wanted to talk about was, like, beauty is definitely just something, like, you can perceive. Like, it's not, everybody has a different definition of what's beautiful.
Mhm.
And I feel like that was one of the main, like, points she wanted to hit, because
Mhm.
like, the light-skinned people, they thought that their color was beautiful, and then, like, dark people, like, idolized people that were, like, white and had blonde hair and blue eyes. So it was all just different perceptions of what beauty actually was,
Mhm.
and, like, what
Yeah.
that those different perceptions can do to people.
I think it also was kind of hinting at that there's no like real standard for beauty, or that there at least shouldn't be one, because they did focus a lot on how the African American people felt like really discouraged and kind of like not really ashamed, but they always wanted to be something else. And then as a reader, you could tell like this is obviously not right. That's not how they should be feeling. And so, and then especially at the end when they showed how crazy the girl got, and then how she finally did get what she wanted, how it is kind of a crazy reality to want something so extreme and something that's not yourself. And so then you should just be grateful for, like, I mean, you should be, everyone's beautiful, so there's no reason why you should want to be like someone else. I think that's kind of like what she wanted to hint at.
Mm-hmm.
I think from actually after hearing the question again, I think I can maybe give a better answer to our book. It's kind of give a lot of books or a lot of things out there don't give an accurate like, or don't give like the perspective of a person with depression. They don't really give like, no one, like, I never really like thought to like think about like what thoughts does a person, like, I always hear, oh, the person has depression, like they're diagnosed, so I think they're just like always sad, or like they're always negative. I never like actually sat down and always thought about, or like, I never got like a true picture about that. And so it gave me a good light, and like gave me different thinking about how people with depression actually think. And I think that's very misconstrued in the media, or how like our perceived thoughts about it. And then also it kind of gives light to how mental illness was treated back in the 50s, which is when this book was taking place.
Yeah, that's
set in. It was set in the 50s, and it gave us perspective on how people with this disease were like treated with lobotomies and electroshock therapy. A lobotomy she did not get, but a person she knew got a lobotomy.
What's that?
It's a lobotomy is a disease, is a procedure where like they will burn part of your brain or cut part of it out sometimes.
They like remove the frontal part of your brain to help with like
part of it. So then
mental illness. To like remove the front part of it.
not
so,
the whole thing, because you actually need that, but like part of it, so in order to like control your emotions better.
Mm-hmm.
I think Jack brought up a really good point. You started talking about like how you started talking about media a little bit, and like the effect of that. Do you remember what you said? I mean, I
said that like
It's misconstrued.
it's misconstrued, because
Yeah.
I always thought this depression was someone always being sad or something like that. I
Yeah.
never thought of the actual thoughts they go through, because the way the author told it was how they could never find anything that was going positive. Like, it always felt like no matter what would happen, something bad would always happen.
And
They
I
can
think
warn it.
go on. I think these topics, like in both books, are still kind of portrayed in the media in a different way today as well. Like how you said you never read a book where it comes from the first perspective of someone that actually has depression, or at least there's not very many of them. And I think that's still kind of prevalent. Like in media, you don't really hear it. Like you hear about it, but you don't really like hear about it. And then same with like Bethany and I's book. the beauty is like beauty standards are still like perceived very differently in the media than the way maybe they should be. And so I think both of our books kind of relate to like, even though they were still like very relatable back then, they're also relatable now as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
you can go, JC.
I watched like for my extension from part 1, I watched like a TED talk about this guy, and it was called Signs of a Depressed Comic or something like that. And it was how his friends and his family and everyone he know would say like he's a great student, he's very social, he's funny, whatever, but he described himself as probably those same things, except like he struggled from depression since he was like 13 years old or something. And so he said like it wasn't talked about enough, like he didn't feel comfortable talking about it with like other people, because even though millions of people suffer from this disease, like it's not talked about enough, because like I don't know if it's necessarily that people are scared, but like nobody will bring it up without like, I don't know, he was saying how people get discomforted if they talk about it, and like somebody doesn't know like how to act around someone who has depression. It's like they don't know how to handle that stuff. And kind of in our book, it was that same thing. She didn't really tell people. It's just the reader could understand that from like how she was talking. But like I remember this one part, her mom, when she went to like the asylum, her mom saw all these people that were like talking about how they wanted to kill themselves, and she was like, oh, my baby would never be like these crazy people. And then like a few chapters later, it was like when it cut to like her making attempts to try and kill herself. And so I think it's like she didn't feel comfortable sharing that with her mom or with like her psychiatrist or anything, because she kept saying that she was fine. Like, I don't know.
Also, the thing that happened later is that people would come and visit her in the asylum, and like it'd be like the priest in the area and like old friends, old neighbors, stuff like that would come visit her. And the way she would describe them, like watching her like come in, they'd feel like she was this kind of like wild animal.
Mm-hmm.
And they're always like tentative, like to say anything, or like they were like scared that like she was about to like leap up and like bite their hands off. I'm just saying that like with how I perceived it. And like they just because she had depression, they treated her. They treated her. Her treatment went from just a normal human being to some crazy thing that is mentally unstable and that is unsafe for society. And I feel like that gets underrepresented sometimes about how like people with mental illnesses they get demonized, not demonized, but like they become like villains kind of. They're not looked at upon like normal people who just have like a health issue, like upon like other people who have cancer. We don't look at people who have cancer and think they're about to jump up and like attack me. But with people with mental illness, sometimes if you hear someone who they were at an asylum, you think your mind instantly goes, "Oh, this person's crazy and they're like unsafe to be around."
Yeah. And like at the like places that she was staying, it depended on like what level she was at with her disease. Like they'd say if she got better, she'd get to move up to the different one and she'd get different privileges. But when she first started out, she didn't even have community privileges. Like she couldn't go out to the community and shop and be around other people. They just strictly kept her there. And I thought that was kind of weird, because I know that in like back in the 1950s when it was written, that they treated mental illness differently. But at the same time, it just kind of was weird to me to think that they wouldn't let people with depression, which is a very common disease, like just be around other people. Like I thought that was weird.
And then also like she talked about how people were just the same. Like this is a small thing, but in the book she mentioned how everyone at the asylum were like they're playing card games and stuff like that, and she described it exactly. She related it back to when she was a freshman in college. And just think about that, how these people with this disease and then people just in college, they do the same thing every day, and they're actually not that different. Mm-hmm. But they're treated completely different and forced to go to these asylums. Mm-hmm. This is brings to like the mental illness.
Are there any like final thoughts or questions before we wrap it up? Because I think we're past 20.
Over time, we're good.
Well, in our offense, I'm laughing for like
you're fine.
5 minutes. Oh, yeah.
Well, that's okay because when they see the timestamp, they're just gonna see 30 minutes. So it doesn't matter how much time was laughing.
How can we stop it? Does anybody know?
Final thoughts. Most
Final
important thing about your
thoughts.
book.
My book was weird.
Final thoughts. I thought my book had a good message, and
Yeah.
but it was kind of hard to follow at some points. But I definitely liked the second half of the book much better than the first half because it was a lot more interesting and like easier to stay. Like it switched perspectives, but the perspectives were a lot easier to follow than when it just talked about all the little girls.
Jason, you can go.
Okay. I think wrapping up, I thought my book had like a very different way of displaying mental illness than it is today, but at the same time with media and the things we talked about, I think that it is similar to today, and it gave an insight into the life of someone who actually suffered from the disease.
My final thought, I think this book was very well written, and even though I didn't necessarily start off liking it, definitely at the end, I actually think this is one of my favorite books I've read, just because it opened my mind to a different I never really read sad books or books that aren't always happy. Kind of opened my mind to a different genre.
Well, I thought my book was kind of hard to follow, but I did like it, except I just found some of the things that she said pretty disturbing. But it was a well-written book. I think it did talk about, the beauty standards.
Okay. I will send you guys